Hello and welcome to another episode of Metro Home Theater Tech Tips. I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
And what do we got today, Adam?
Well, today we're talking about a really very important subject for the day. We're talking about grounding and how important it is.
And it says grounding essentials right there.
Grounding essentials, that's right. And so we're talking about the importance of it and just how astronomically important it is to your build or your project that you're working on. And it doesn't matter if you're doing audio, video, IP networking. It doesn't matter if you're doing digital setups or the old analog setups. An audio setup doesn't matter. Grounding and just how absolutely essential it is and how important it is.
And why are we doing this?
Well, because we are getting a lot of calls, and most importantly, we're actually getting a lot of calls from people that are having issues with their cable boxes. And that subject alone would actually be a really good an entire episode on its own. Later on.
For the new Metro Home Theater Group Tech Tips Expanded?
Yes, when we get to doing that, hopefully we'll be able to get that off the ground and running, where we have our regular tech tips now, and then we get into more details in our actual tech tips expanded, where we'll go into even finer detail about what's going on.
Which could be multiple episodes for each project.
Right, and so we'll get to that.
I like it.
We'll see how that goes. You guys can see that take off later on.
And before we get going, can you tell me what we're looking at here?
We've got our grounding setup. We've got our little...
yeah. Oh, okay, so that's the ground rod into the ground.
Yep, you got your ground rod into the ground. You got your
like
little
Jurassic
dinosaur.
Parking there?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So Brent, you have firsthand experience with
yes.
with grounding issues. Kind of want to share with the class a little bit and tell us
Absolutely.
what happened.
One of the things we're running into a lot now is calls that are grounding based. And we'll get guys, they'll give us a call and we walk through the normal issues. You know, is it a bail-in issue? Is it a cable issue? What's going on? And one of the things I ask dealers to have on their trucks now is a good 50-foot, 14-gauge extension cord.
With the grounding plug.
With the grounding plug.
Yes.
Do not take the grounding plug off.
Yes.
A lot of dealers will do that because it makes it easier and it removes some other problems. But if it's removing those problems, it's telling you
that there's
a problem.
Exactly.
So with the calls, I'll have the guys run an extension cord to a device and suddenly things work.
Right.
So nobody wants to hear it's their electrician. The electrician will say, well, the light works. And it does.
Yeah, yep.
But that doesn't mean the system's correct. So what we're going to get into is a little bit about the importance of grounding and why. I'm an old man, obviously, so I deal with and have dealt with analog issues. And for that, grounding was very important because you could pick up a higher noise floor in your audio. You'd hear a little tss in the background of the speakers or a hum. And in the early days of video, it would be rolling bars or herringbones or a diagonal line across the screen.
Right.
And all that was because of grounding. So we figured out pretty early on how important grounding was. Now, you're a rack master. Do you ground your racks?
I don't know about a master, but yes, I do. So making sure that you ground the entirety of the rack to the power supply that's in the rack. Yeah, definitely.
Just because it's not connected to the power does not mean it's not connected to the ground.
Right.
All the metal chassis, the screws, anytime you have these pieces touching metal, it becomes part of the circuit. So absolutely, you do want to ground. And grounding is not always to protect your gear, that it does, but it's also to provide a conduit for extraneous noise.
Right.
And it has to go somewhere, otherwise it just stays. So we now have, because we're not the smartest blokes in the world, a list of things we want to discuss during the broadcast.
That's right.
And we got the intro away in importance. Guys, it is really, really, really important to ground. Now, where you are in the country will affect how you ground. We are in the southeast. Florida is basically a little floating piece of phosphate and silica over the water table.
And what's silica?
Glass. And what's glass?
It's
an insulator.
Exactly.
So when you ground in Florida, per code, which is a 10-foot ITT copper rod, you're really not grounding.
Yeah.
You and I had this discussion yesterday. How deep do you need to go in Florida?
In some cases, you may need to go as far as 100 feet in Florida.
Absolutely, to get a real ground.
True.
Now, there are specs, there are codes, there are ways to deal with this. But really what you want to do, the simplest way is just to do an ITT copper rod pounded in the ground and go by NEC specs, but that's not going to be enough in Florida. Areas where there's granite, Georgias, the Northeast, the Midwest, the West Coast, where they have real bedrock, you don't have to go as far because once you hit bedrock, you have the ground of the earth available to you.
Exactly. Now,
We
guys, also with all of this, definitely go ahead and in the comments, ask your questions. We're always looking for questions to see.
We want to know.
Yeah, what are you guys running into? If you have a question for us
Or an idea.
we also want to hear stories. We love hearing stories about what you guys are running into out in the field. If you ran into a grounding issue and you have a question about that grounding issue, ask it now. Drop it down in the comments, and we'll see what we can do about getting a response to you. Also, go ahead and if you have a story about a grounding issue that you ran into in the past, ask that. Tell us that story. We love hearing these kind of stories to find out what's going on out there, because it also a lot of times it'll help inspire. It teaches us and inspires us
to new products
for different products and whatnot. So if you're running into a problem, and in fact, what I really want to touch base on is what happened at the Pink House.
Well, Pink House, I got lucky because it happened at my house first.
Okay.
I'm at home, and I have a decent system in my house, and I
Right.
was showing it off to a friend, and he commented there was a hum in my subwoofer. Now, I don't have hums in my subwoofer. Now, granted, I'm a bit of a pompous jerk,
Sure.
but I'm pretty careful about my system, and I don't get hums in my subwoofer. And there was a hum in my subwoofer.
There was a hum.
And that's embarrassing. And I also noticed that when my AC kicked on, my lights dimmed a little bit. That's not a good sign.
Nope.
So I'm in there and trying to figure out why I have a hum. I'm in the back of my rack, and typically this comes into an issue with the coax,
Right.
feeding in from the street, because it's a ground potential difference between the hub at the street and your house. I disconnect the coax from my surge protector, and my lights visibly dimmed.
Right.
I screw the coax back in, they get brighter. Now, granted, I'm not the brightest bulb in the house,
Right.
but that kind of concerned me. So I picked up my phone, I called my electrician and said, "Hey, Rob, this just happened to me." He said, "Okay, unplug everything, get out of the house, call FPL."
Yeah.
Now, you call the power company and, okay, right, sure. They send a truck out. The guy walks up, opens up the box to my meter, looks at my meter, runs back to his truck, gets on the phone. There were 3 trucks there in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
The ground from the street had dropped. So what I just had was the 2 legs coming into the house and no ground. The only ground the entire house had was through the coax back to the hub for the cable distribution system.
Right.
And that's insufficient amount of copper.
It really isn't. It's definitely not enough. I mean, when you look at what a good grounding setup
12
is,
gauge.
12 gauge. Well,
ITT copper
if
rod.
you're trying to run that much kind of grounding
Over the
ability,
braid on a piece of coax?
it's definitely not enough, and
So
you're going to cause some
It
serious
can also
troubles.
cause fires.
Right.
Because at that point, there's not sufficient shunting in the system if there's a problem.
Right.
So that's why the power company freaked. Now, the Pink House.
Yes.
Pink House was an off-site R&D facility that was built in the 50s, and there were some old 2-wire outlets, and then some 3 wires that we added that were properly wired with load, neutral, and ground.
Right.
One day I'm over there and I noticed that our new outlets are not working. Now I'm over there because I have cable getting installed. So I'm waiting for the cable guy. He comes and he goes to the back and unscrews the coax from the grounding port to check things and gets shocked.
Not like a regular little shock that you would get from just running your feet on the carpet.
I heard him scream. It's
Yep.
like, oh. So I run out back. It's like, what's wrong? He said, I just unscrewed the coax. I touched this box and I got shocked. Now, I'm not an idiot, but it dawned on me. It's like, this just happened at my house.
There you go.
I know this problem. So I said, okay, we'll reschedule cable, send him on his way, called FPL. Guy comes out, and when you look at the wire to your house, assuming it's overhead and not underground,
Right.
you'll have 2 jacketed feeds and 1 unjacketed feed.
Right.
The unjacketed feed is the ground. Now, there was basically a splice up there, and one of those sides was hanging out of the splice. It was just dangling in space.
Didn't have a connection.
So there was no ground from the house to the electrical pole.
Right.
The only ground was through the coax.
That's frightening.
It is.
That really is. That's
Now,
not
this
enough
happens
for
more
that.
than a lot of people realize.
Right.
When we talk to dealers, they'll go out, it's like, oh crap. And so it does happen. So it's important to understand this is not your world, but it is your world.
Yeah.
Because it involves us, we do have to understand this. And that's why grounding is so very important.
So Brent, let's we now know about the importance, and we kind of touched base a little bit in your story actually about how to diagnose it. But let's get in a little bit deeper into the diagnosing of it. And again, guys, ask your questions. I didn't mention this before, but the best question or even the best story, I'm going to go ahead and put the story in there with it as well.
Because there's some good ones out there.
Exactly. So the best question or the best story has a chance to win. We're giving away another
Helios fiber cable.
No, it's not Helios. It's actually Install Bay.
The Install Bay with the detachable head shell?
Not the detachable one. We're not giving that one away yet. But we are giving away the AOC 30-foot HDMI optical cable.
Fantastic.
Fiber optic cable. So definitely look for that one, guys.
And if you haven't used the fiber optic cable, it is a great way to get 24 gigabits from point A to point B.
It's a great piece. Yeah. So again, best questions, best comments,
Story?
best stories, whatever you've got.
Send
Definitely
us
put it down in the
photos of
comments.
issues if you got some.
Yeah, definitely
We like
do
to see
that as
that.
well. So best out of all of that, we'll have a chance to win the HDMI cable. So definitely check that out. So talking about diagnosing. So
Okay.
let's talk about where does where can we see a grounding problem, or where can we hear it? I guess honestly is a good spot.
When you're
to start.
looking at HDMI, because that is really the bulk of our calls,
Right.
HDMI symptoms are fairly limited.
Right.
I mean, there's snow, there's no picture, and then there's no picture with some kind of words on the screen.
Right.
And that's kind of what we see. Occasionally you'll see like a white blooming or white streaks on the screen.
Right.
We don't see as much of that, and that is not grounding. That is actually voltage on the line.
Right. That's actually coming in from the cable
Right,
company.
and that'd be another episode of Metro Home Theater Tech Tips.
Yeah.
Because we're going to get deep into cable boxes.
Yeah.
But with grounding issues with HDMI, it can be flickering, it could be dropouts, you could turn a light on somewhere and the picture comes and goes, the refrigerator kicks on. So it is hard to say, okay, this is a grounding issue, this is a needed issue, this is a this. That's why there's certain things you have that you need to have on your truck. And by the way, what is next week's episode?
Next week we're going to be talking about how to troubleshoot.
So
Yeah.
that will tie right in with what we're discussing today. But things you want to have on your truck specifically for this issue, carry an extra long HDMI cable.
Yep.
And carry a 50-foot 14-gauge extension cord, not 16-gauge.
Right. Yeah.
3-conductor, because what we're going to have you do is actually run from wherever your rack is to the TV and plug the TV into that system.
Right.
Now, again, the electrician is going to tell you, well, lights work, power turns on, everything's good. That does not mean that it's properly grounded. Now, this is an outlet.
Right.
Now, this is a fairly fancy outlet because it has the USB ports in it, but it's what I had on my desk to discuss today.
Of course.
So, when you look at it, you've got neutral, line or load, and ground.
Right.
This is a whole lot more important than people give it credit for because it doesn't have the fancy push-in terminals and it doesn't have all the hoopla and you don't shock yourself when you
Yeah.
But this is very, very important because this is what takes the noise away from the system.
I would almost say that it's almost more important than
It
some of the other
is
stuff.
because these you actually can get away with a lower quality connection than you can on that.
You know, I'd almost say that it'd be kind of like in the world of fast cars. You got to be able to stop in that fast car.
Yeah,
And so
that's
if
the brakes.
If you don't have the ability to stop and brake correctly, well, it doesn't matter how fast you're going. You're going to hit something
So,
eventually.
in a lot of cases, guys either will just kind of wrap this around it and not make it tight or not even worry about it.
Right.
And this becomes important not just on your hi-fi, but on things like fans.
Right.
Because that motor will generate noise, and if it doesn't have a drain to put it to, guess where that noise is going?
Right into your sound
Right
system.
into your
or
sound
right into
system or into your video.
system.
So you'll see little bits of noise and things like that, and it's
Right.
hard to diagnose.
Right.
So when people call us up and they're going to say, you know, I'm having this issue, and it is not uncommon for both Adam and I to get on these calls and tag team them, even though only one of us is on the phone.
Right.
Because in a lot of cases, it's things he's experienced, things I've experienced that are different from each other.
Right.
So we'll get on a tag team. It's like, okay, let's look at this. And grounding is quickly becoming a bigger issue because as houses are built faster and faster, the quality of the electrical work is diminishing because they're trying to get it done quicker and at a lower cost. So you have to look at all these things. Do not assume just because the light turns on, the electrical is correct.
Right. So let's talk about one instance in particular. I had a guy call up, and the problem that he ran into was he had the amplifier in one rack because it was far away from where he had his source device, and the source device was in a different rack. Now he was using just a cheap audio balun or audio extender
Right.
that would take the audio from the source device and send it long distance over to the actual amplifier. Now, And his issue, what he was running into, is that whenever he had everything plugged in, he had audio, but he had a hum or a whine or something going along
Right.
with it. So we of course we tested and everything else, and even if the source was turned off, the whine was still there. But as soon as he unplugged that cable from either end, or that connection from either end, he would actually have no whine or no hum. And so of course at that point we have a differential and grounding.
Right.
So at that point, what would be a good way to, again, to test that?
Well, we're back to the extension cord.
Exactly.
The extension cord, typically you will take, grounding is generally done at the receive side, more important than the send side.
Right.
It's just for car audio guys, you always have the really big ground at the amplifier, and you
Right.
take everything to it.
Right.
Because it is the largest current draw.
Right.
So you want that to be the shortest length of wire, and you want everything, all the lesser current draws to go to that.
Right.
So what we did is we had them run an extension cord from where that amp was
Yep.
back to the source side,
All the way over there.
and plugged it in. And was there noise?
Nope.
No.
Went away.
Now, is this something that he's going to fix himself?
Probably
not.
No.
They're going to have to get an electrician involved, depending on codes in your area and your relationship with your customer.
Right.
But it is absolutely now, it could be that the load and the line, the neutral and the line are reversed on an outlet.
Yeah.
Or it could be that the ground is not properly done.
Right.
This is why you don't want to do this yourself, because you do not want to take ownership of that 110 volt system, because unless you are a licensed electrician,
Yep.
it can come back and bite you.
Yeah. Please do not get into
Understand
into that if you
what's
don't- if
going
you're not there
on.
Ready for it.
But don't do it.
Right. So, and in that instance, I mean, you could very easily have the everything could be grounded. However, because you may not have a good grounding point either back
right.
at the panel
Yes.
or between the panels,
Yes.
you don't have the
Or they
correct
could be
amount
on
of
separate
grounding.
sides of the panel,
Right. Right.
separate circuits, and that can also affect this.
Exactly.
So, and there will be a Metro Home Theater Tech Tips expanded version where I sit down and talk with our electrician, Rob,
Yep.
to go in great detail on this, because the ability to work with an electrical contractor
Yes.
becomes very important in our world, because electrical contractors don't understand what we do.
Well, and vice versa. There's a lot of guys who are doing our
Load
side of
balancing
things
and stuff that's
that
critical.
just don't get the idea of AC, and I'm one of them. I'll be perfectly honest with you. It took me a little while to grasp the concept of AC power. DC power is pretty simple. We're going one direction. We're turning left. We're NASCAR. Whereas when you have the AC current, you're doing a whole bunch of stuff
There's a
all
lot
at once.
going on
They're doing a road course.
Grounding actually becomes more critical in the AC world than in the DC world.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so just making sure that everything is done correctly with that. So I definitely want to get in and
let's-
when Rob can.
Troubleshooting, this will wind up being a multi-episode expanded version.
Agreed.
Because there's a lot to go over. And by the way, you're going to see a lot of really good topics in the Metro Home Theater Tech Tips expanded, including the network from last week.
Exactly, yeah.
Very excited about that.
Yeah, definitely.
So fixing. Guys, the reality of this is you're going to have to get the electrician involved.
Yeah.
Do not dig into an outlet yourself and say, oh, I can fix that. Don't.
Unless you're a licensed electrician, we definitely do not condone getting in there and making changes yourself to it. It's just too dangerous, and you don't want that liability sitting on you unless, again, you are a licensed and trained electrician to be doing that.
You don't want to burn his house down.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about grounding inside of a rack,
Oh, yes.
directly there. Now, that's something that I can definitely fix. That's something that's on me at
Yes.
that point.
And it should be. And what will happen is if you have a good surge protector, power strip, something like that,
Right.
typically we'll have a ground lug on the back.
Yes.
So you will ground, you will take a piece of the rack, take the pane off, and most rack manufacturers actually provide you a point to do this.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you will take a piece of 12 gauge, typically braided, so it's a little bit more flexible,
Yep.
from that to your surge protector or UPS system.
Right. Yeah, you'll see that symbol on there, that ground symbol, and you got the circle around it, and usually it's a kind of like a fan setup, and isn't that a piece something like that?
Yeah,
Just right about like that.
It's
Yeah.
that is the ground.
Yeah, so definitely, take advantage of those grounding points. And actually, a lot of times, the higher end, like Blu-ray players,
Or a three-prong plug.
will have a three-prong plug, and that's good to have. But even some of those will even have a grounding pin on
Yes,
the
on the
actual
back of it,
chassis.
yes.
Yeah. So use it. I mean, anytime that you can actually
Now,
combine
and let's
all that,
talk
and make
about
sure it's
general
good.
grounding. When
Right.
you look at coax, HDMI network connections, inside of the device, they all share the same grounding backplane.
Right.
This is why you can pick up noise onto other devices from your cable company.
Right.
And pretty much at some point in time, everybody's dealt with a bad cable ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why their surge protection is required if you have a coax or an Ethernet cable connected to it, or a serial, because it's the same grounding backplane. This is why we recommend surge protection on the HDMI ports on those devices.
Yes.
And for us, that's the new SP3.
Yes. Which is
Should be in stock very shortly.
Yeah, really soon actually.
Very
in fact,
excited
if I
about
remember
that.
correctly. So, but yeah,
But
so
you
definitely.
have to look at your high voltage grounding and your low voltage grounding. I encourage you to not pull that third plug off
Yeah.
your cords.
Yeah.
For testing purposes, however, I would have a floating adapter
Yes.
because it will help you find where that problem is.
Exactly.
Or have an extension cord
Yep.
for testing purposes
Only for testing purposes, yes.
that has that pin broke off to find out
Right.
if there's a ground differential.
Now, you and Rob will probably get into details about what if you run into a house that only has two prongs
Yes.
set up. It happens. You go up
Hey, we
into the
had this
northeast.
discussion
Yes,
yesterday.
we did. In fact, you go up somewhere in the northeast or the older houses.
Yep.
You have two prong setups with it, and you guys will get into more detail
Surge
about
protectors
that.
are nominal at that point.
Yeah. Well, now, granted, you can use things like an MOV surge
Which is
suppression.
absorptive.
Yeah.
Yes, but it's not going to
absorbs it.
shunt it to somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and then of course you'll talk about the newer
And which
houses
means
everything
anything
else.
that's $12 and claims to be a surge protector is not.
Yeah.
Because there's no absorption in those.
Yeah. Exactly. So.
Please send us your questions, your stories. We will get into much greater detail on the Tech Tips Expanded
Yep.
on this topic. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
Any other observations, young man?
No, I think that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks again for checking in with us. And again, best questions, best stories. We'll have a chance to win that HDMI cable. So definitely give us those questions, give us those stories. We love hearing it. And if you got pictures, go ahead and send it to us. And again, if you have any, if you have a need to call us, of course feel free to call us on our tech support line, 386-255-0234. It's option 3 or it's extension 8301. So feel free to give us a call, ask those questions, or if you just want to tell us a story, we're happy to do that too.
Yeah, it is actually nice to hear success stories.
Yeah, definitely. So if you've run into a problem or anything like that, definitely give us a call and let us know what you had and how you overcame it, or if you didn't overcome it,
let us help you.
Yeah, let's see if we can do it. So
And what's our next topic again?
tomorrow, probably not tomorrow. Our next topic will be on troubleshooting and how to troubleshoot, just the basics of how to do
Right,
it. So.
because let's face it, 20 minutes, we can't teach you the whole world, but we can give you a good idea where to go, and a reminder to check out the new Metro Home Theater Tech Tips Expanded.
That's right.
I'm Brent.
I'm Adam.
Thank you.
Thanks.